This is Haunted New Orleans.
My name is Holly Vest. I'm the owner of Magnolia Mansion here in New Orleans, Louisiana. I bought the mansion in 2001 and began renovating it and opened it as a small hotel / B&B in July of 2002. The only apparition that I've ever seen was one night I came back on a red-eye flight, went into room 2, and we were planning to have a wedding that weekend. Went to sleep. Early that morning, about 5:30, I was awakened. There was a man standing there in my room facing the door with his hand on the doorknob, and I could see him plain as day. He had a cap on, a plaid shirt, pair of jeans, and some boots. And he's about 6'2", and I said, "Sir, what are you doing in my room? I think you're in the wrong room." And he didn't move, he didn't look at me, he didn't do anything except he dissipated. He just dissolved.
Well, my first experience here in the house was my first night being left here alone. Holly had gone back to Vegas, and I was walking through the mansion about 10 o'clock at night, making sure everything was safe, turned some lights off and things like that. As I got to the middle of the hallway, after turning the lights in the hallway off, had this cold rush hit me, and then this real warm feeling come across me, almost like a change in temperature in seconds. And got to the front door, went outside, called Holly on the phone and said, "You're not going to believe this." I told her what happened, told her what I was doing. She's like, "Well, what did you do?" I said, "Well, I turned the light off in the hallway." And she goes, "Go back and turn the light on. They were telling me you're not supposed to turn that light off. We're supposed to keep that on because it's a hotel."
We had just gutted the kitchen. The big cedar door, which weighs about 300 pounds, was hanging there, had no hardware on it. And I had one big fellow that was one of the workers. He was staying here in my absence. And he was on the phone with his girlfriend with his back to the kitchen, and that door slammed open, cold air went past him, and then the door slammed shut. We had a lady and a husband arrive on their honeymoon, and they checked into the Vampire Lover's Lair. And they had just come off of a cruise, and she wasn't feeling good. She was a little nauseous, so they laid down. He got more nervous as the night went on because she was getting extremely nauseous, running a fever, so I sent him down to the hospital, the emergency hospital. Well, the next morning, she shows up to breakfast, and she had this little smile on her face. I said, "You're great, you're doing okay." And she said, she whispered in my ear, and she was pregnant. So I said, "Wonderful. Well, how was the experience?" And I meant at the hospital. And she says, "Oh, it was fabulous." I said, "At the hospital?" She said, "No." And so she told me that when they got home, she laid down on the bed, and she had the covers off of her because she was feeling very feverish. Well, shortly thereafter, she felt a stroke on her cheek. The sheets come up. She looked over to tell her husband, "Thank you and I love you." And he was sound asleep facing the wall, so we thought our caretaker had come down to take care of her because she wasn't feeling well. Another nurse who was staying here with her husband stay in the same room. She suffers from migraine headaches, and she was resting, and she had the same thing happen with stroking. Every night at 2:30 she would wake up and there was a stroking on her arm, a soothing stroke. This happened several nights in a row, and every time she would wake up to find this, her husband was sound asleep. While she was getting dressed in the mirror, she noticed that a man walked into the room. She thought it was her husband coming back. She looked up and started talking and realized her husband wasn't even in the room. No one was in the room, and he showed up a few minutes later.
She had come out when she thought she was talking to her husband, and she went into the dining room to start making her breakfast, and she said, I said, "Something's wrong?" And she goes, "I just had the strangest feeling." And then we started talking, and I said to her, I said, "Well, we think that the caretaker was a nurse of some sort." And she goes, "I can totally agree with you. I am a nurse by trade, and this woman is a nurse that's here, that's taking care of people. She is a nurse." And told me of the stroking and how she felt as the night went on. And this lady was suffering really bad because she didn't come out the room most of the day. But at night she felt much better.
Sure enough, time and time again, we kept getting reports of this. I finally had to pull the bed away from the wall, and I had to talk to the spirit, and I call her the caretaker. I believe she's a caretaker because one of the women who was staying here with her husband's a doctor, they kept them up till about 4 o'clock in the morning, and she actually saw the apparition sitting at the foot of the bed, and she described her as a a female with a turban, and just sitting there peacefully at the end of the bed.
This group that we had in May, 12 people came in. A lady decided not to take one of the tours that they were going on during the day. She was going to go upstairs and relax in the big tub that she was staying in her room. She put the little bottles of shampoo that we give you when you check into the hotel, and she put her wine glass up there, and she's sitting there and she's in the tub soaking, and the shampoo bottle jumps over her wine glass and into the water, and she comes out and she's like, I said, yeah, that's our child that plays with all the different things. She came down, she was white as a ghost. She was scared. But she was like, okay, she had her experience.
We are a romantic destination, and everyone that stays here is either here for their anniversary, to propose, they've gotten married, they're on their honeymoon. So we're 21 years or older, we don't allow children. But we keep getting reports that there's a child playing upstairs, they're laughing. People at the breakfast table sometimes see children standing on the stairway, and they hear, you know, little children running, and we've even found tiny little handprints in our bathroom rugs and in our bathtubs. And people say, I thought you didn't allow children here. I thought you had no children here, and we don't. So they want to know what they're seeing, because they're not real children, and we still don't know who they are.
In the Garden District itself, started out as a plantation. It was the Livaday family plantation, and Celeste Maroney was married to Jacques Livaday, and apparently she decided at some point she didn't want to be married to Jacques Livaday anymore, and she filed for divorce and managed to win the plantation in the divorce, and then promptly sold it to developers. And those developers laid out the Garden District. But prior to all of the divorce and the transfer and all of that, she had a niece living with her on the plantation, and her niece drowned in a pool on the plantation, and they see her ghost all over the neighborhood. You know, there's plenty of kids around, so not everybody always notices her at first. But I had one tourist had seen this little girl across the street at the Magnolia Mansion, and it initially didn't think anything of it, but she stopped for a moment and realized it was odd, in fact, to see a kid alone on the street. And then she looked up again to see where the child was, and the child was right in front of her. And then she went to ask the girl where her mother was, and the girl opened up her mouth and water just poured out of her mouth, and she just melted away.